Okay, guys, so the first one I'm going to do is the zoo inventory question because I think that one is actually more simple than you might have thought when you first started tackling the problem. The main focus of this problem is figuring out how to access different variables inside of multi-dimensional arrays. So I'll just copy and paste this example because I don't want to write one out myself because I'm lazy. But you can expect that the zoo inventory function will always take a zoo in this format. That is, that is the one key truth that you need to remember when solving this question. It is always going to be an array of arrays, and each of those arrays will always be the same. The first index will, at index 0, the first element, will always be the name of the animal, whereas the first index, the second element, will always be another array. And inside that array, the 0th index is always going to be the species, and then the first index is always going to be the age. That is a truth to this problem, okay? So, let's start by saying const zoo inventory is going to be equal to this, right? And it takes a zoo, and basically what we want to do is we want to return an array of strings. Yes, we want to return an array of strings, basically saying like King Kong the gorilla is 42, Nemo the fish is 5. Another pain point to this problem that I really dislike is that the answer will be wrong if you do not put punctuation in the sentences. So if you forget the period, you might spend hours looking for what is going wrong, when it's really just a period. This is really annoying, but it's fine. So what we want to do is first, we know that we want to return an array of different things. So the first thing I can just do automatically is I say let results array, and I'm just going to set that equal to an empty array. Like a result string, whatever, we're going to be pushing elements into this array. What we will be pushing is an entire string, a sentence, and each element in this array will be a different sentence for each of these animal things, these animal arrays of information, okay? So, how can we programmatically get to each thing in this array, each element, and go deep inside of it? We can use a for loop, right? No problems here, right? Please stop me if anybody has any questions on my method of thinking at any point, okay? So I'm just going to set up a for loop, and I know I want to go from the beginning of the array until the end, because we need to hit every element. So there's nothing tricky about setting up the for loop. Just start at 0 and go until zoo.length, and then increment I every time. So now we can say results array dot push. And here I'm going to, if you saw the solutions, there are two solutions. One is it's not like complicated, I guess, but it just pulls out every element and gives it a humanized name so that that everybody knows what you're doing. But this is a lot faster and saves a lot more lines. This is called string interpolation. You use backticks, which is under the escape key in a Mac, okay? Backticks means that you can write anything you want as a string, and then if you do a $sign and an open and closed curly brace, here you can put JavaScript. So that means this zoo is going to be this actual zoo, you know? Here you can write JavaScript. Any questions on string interpolation? So you can think of backticks as regular quotes, right? Or single apostrophes. Anything you put in them, this is a string. This is a string, right? Like if I just did console log result array, at the end, did I do something dumb? Oh, I don't call this anymore. So, cannot read length property of undefined. Zoo. Quantity because. Huh? Oh, it's my. Oh yeah, my zoo. Duh. My bad. So you see that this is just an array of strings, right? So what if I did, and this is also going to be an array of a string, right? But what if I do $, open curly brace, close curly brace, I. 0, 1, 2. Because the I is a variable, and that's JavaScript. It's not a string, you know? So that's the code for string interpolation using backticks. If you do a $, and then an open close curly brace, anything inside of the curly brace can be an equation or a variable, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So using this, now we don't have to do this plus space plus variable plus space, comma, plus variable plus period. We can just do it all in one string. But what do we do? The first thing we need to do is King Kong. So we need the name, right? We need this guy's name. And right now, at zoo of I, we just have these arrays, right? But we have to dive into those arrays to pull out the actual name. So we can do $, open close curly brace, zoo, at I, at 0. Does everyone understand how this will get us the name of every animal? When I is changing, we go through these big arrays. Because my zoo only has 3 things in it. So it goes through these big arrays. And so when I is 0, zoo of I is literally going to be this thing, okay? This first array. This first array at 0 gives us King Kong. That's how you access elements deeper and deeper into things, okay? This is also going to be true with objects when I talk about them after I'm done with these things. So now that we have that, we can just put, since we're out of the curly brace, we can just put a space, the space, then another $, and we could do zoo at I. Now, since we got 0 before, we have the name. And all of these things have 2 things in them, right? A string and an array. So now we need to access that array. So we will do at 1, and that'll give us the array. Oh shit. At 1, that'll give us the array. But we have to go even deeper inside here. This is why this method might be a little confusing to some of you, because I'm doing zoo at I at 1 at 0. Okay? There are 3 things. But this is valid syntax. I can do things like this. Because it's literally going, okay, we're doing zoo at I. First, JavaScript has to find out what this is. If I was 0, it would be this one. Okay, so we have this array at 1. All right. That's this element, right? First index. Okay, we have that array. Oh, we have at 0. So there must be something. That thing must be an index, and that thing must be like an iterable data type, and it is. It's an array, so it has an index of 0. That gives us its species, right? So then, outside of the curly braces, we could say is, and this is literally the same thing at I, at 1, at 1, period. Because zoo at I at 1 at 0 is this, so zoo at I at 1 is the number. So then, if we don't do this and we return results array, and then we could console log what this does. King Kong the gorilla is 42, Nemo the fish is 5, whatever the groundhog is 11. Any questions before I do rotate array?
Sorry, what was the $sign symbol for?
That is for string interpolation if you decide to write strings using backticks instead of quotes. So basically, if you use backticks and you do the $ bracket, you can write JavaScript in there, and it will make whatever that thing evaluates to into a string. So zoo at I at 0, whatever that is, it could have been a number, whatever it is, it's now just going to be a string, and it's going to be right here in this long string.
Whereas if you're just doing a regular quotation mark,
you would have to do zoo at I at 0 plus quotes the plus this plus space is space plus, you know. So this is, I think, faster. Sometimes. Sometimes this is faster. Yeah.
In the solutions video, there was also a spreading by shape, or I think the example was const array animal name, comma animal array animal type animal name equals a zoo, and they were able to.
Wait, what? I've never watched the solution video.
They said
just did what you did, but like for each like variable name, like they named it. So it'd be like current animal, and then like animal type, and then they did the string interpolation at the end.
Oh, like
Combine the variables. So it's the same thing essentially, but they named it.
Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but yeah, both that.
That would be the same thing. That's just the same thing as pulling this out, putting it on a line above, and setting it equal to some variable, and then putting that variable in here instead. Like I can do const name zoo at I at 0. And then put
everything at once. It was const, then like the array name. It was in the same shape as King Kong Gorilla 42.
like const name.
Comma.
Is it another array?
Yeah, another array.
Okay, so species
and then the
equals it to zoo at I.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real with you guys. I'm just gonna say don't worry about that right now. This is ES6. This is called deconstruction. Okay, so in ES6 you can actually. This is the same. This is saying okay, I'm going to. This is an array, and I never really like got deep into why this happens the way it does, but it's like this is an array, and I'm making this an array, and these are now going to all be variables, and I'm pulling them out of this array. But I can access them the same here. So if I did like, and if I did a species, and then I did here, I did, what is it, age. It should be the same thing, right? Yeah. Because you see here how this is an array. So const array, and inside, these things don't exist, right? But this is ES6, this is deconstructing. I am saying now we will be creating these variables. Because you can't really do const, you can't do like, let this equal 5, 7, right? It'll be like, what is this? This doesn't work, you know? But, like if this was, I wonder what would happen now, right? Yeah, some wacky stuff. If this wasn't an array though, if this was, oh well, none of this would work, never mind. That was dumb. Like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this to you. This looks like the same format as this, right? So it's saying, since this has to be the same format as whatever this thing is, or else you will get wacky answers. Like here, right? Like this is King Kong, comma, gorilla, comma, 42, you know? This is when it was just zoo, when it was just the multi-dimensional array. So we look at the name and we find what is in this array at index 0 and we put it here, but this isn't actually going to be inside of an array, this is actually just going to be a variable. We're saying these array brackets, the outermost array brackets, should be matching this, right? And then we have innermost array brackets here because there's an inner array in here. So we're deconstructing it, taking it out of the array and just making it variables. And this is another way to do it. But I honestly wouldn't worry about this right now, okay? This is just extra syntactic sugar, I guess. It's extra stuff. And I probably didn't explain it to you correctly at all. So, you know, don't worry. If you're confused, don't worry about this. But this is a way to do it. If you want more info on this, just Google variable deconstruction arrays and objects, because you could do this with objects too, okay? If you really want to, this is not required for anything to get into full stack, okay? Any other questions on my zoo inventory so I could do rotate array? This question isn't that hard, right? Now that we broke it down so easily. Nice. Cool. So, forget all this. Now, we are going to do rotate array. Rotate array. Const rotate array. So this takes an array, and it takes a number, right? And this is basically how many times we want it to rotate, right? So if we had this, and I did rotate array of example array, and 1, we would want to get rotate, we would want to get 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Right? Okay. So, this problem is hard, okay? It's always hard when you're rotating arrays, rotating grids. Think of that. It's very difficult to wrap your head around, okay? But we're not talking about grids here. We're just talking about one array. And they even help you out. They throw you a bone. They say whatever the number it's going to be, it will never be greater than this, the absolute value of the length, okay? So, we have 5 things in here, right? So if we rotate it 6 times, but technically it should be the same as 1, right? But we don't have to take into account those edge cases, okay? But we do have to account for negatives, because negatives rotate it the other way. There's a very simple way to do this. I know that the solution showed you this 2-line, cool, edgy, solution, but I'm going to show you a solution that I think is more understandable and breaks down how exactly we should tackle something like this. So, if you look over here, this is if there was a 1, right? So if there was a 2 in this space, this 1 would be here, the 2 would be here, the 3 would be there, and then it'd be 4, 5, right? There's going to be a pattern. There's going to be a pattern, right? If there's 1, what we're really doing is from the original thing, we are taking the last thing off and putting it up the front. If it was a 2, we're taking the last 2 things off and putting it in front. If it was 4, we would take the last 4 things and put it in front. That is correct. That is what this problem is actually doing. That is one way that we can rotate an array. And the way I just described it, doesn't it seem very simple to do that with a for loop? Right? We just need to know where to start. Problems get difficult when you have to start for loops in different ways, right? Because your minds are programmed in a way to always do I of 0, go to the end. That is not the case this time, okay? Now we have to start at a pivot point, okay? Because we need to pivot the array, you know? So, also, we have to account if this number is negative. So, we can do something similar to what we did in my slice, right? Because my slice, if there's a negative number, it'll go from the back, right? But the way you guys tackled that was if it was negative, you just made it positive. Because that's always easier. So, if I said if num is less than 0, and I do, so I can just reassign num to be array.length plus num. Because if it was a negative number plus the length, we would get to here, okay? So, now we do a for loop. And we were going to say, oh, wait. First we need a pivot point, right? So const pivot point, and that's going to be array.length minus num, okay? So the pivot point will be I. That is where we will be starting. Then we will go until the end of the array. And we will increment I every time. And I did not put a result array up here. Right? So now we have our pivot point and we say results array dot push array of I. So now, let's look back at the example of example array and 1. 1. Is 1 less than 0? No. So we skip the reassignment. I will walk through a reassignment case later. So we first say pivot point is now going to be array.length, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minus the num, which is 1. So it's 4, okay? So that means we set I is going to be equal to 4. What is array of 4? It's 5, right? Right? So then we push the 5 into result array. And once you increment I will be 5, so it will break out of the for loop immediately. Let me scroll up, right? So this is only going to loop once if the number is 1. If the number was negative 1, it would be reassigned to array.length 5 plus negative 1, which is the same thing as 5 minus 1, which is the same thing as 4, right? So array.length minus 4 will be 1 now, because we are because we are rotating the opposite way. If it was negative 1, we would want, where's the example? We would want the 1 to be over here, right? And then it would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. So if we had a negative 1, and then we really set the pivot point to be 5 minus 4, because we reassign the negative 1 to a 4 here, 5 minus 4 is 1, that means we would start at the 2 and push everything after the 2 into a result array. That is step 1. We started at the pivot point and we went to the end. If the pivot point was if the input number was negative, we reassigned it to something positive. This is weird. This is a weird way of thinking, but I thought this made more sense than using like slice of negative ones and stuff like that, you know? Because people really don't do that often. So this makes sense to me, to start. To finish is actually pretty easy, right? We started from the pivot point, wherever that was, and went to the end. But we're not like deleting anything, you know? We still need everything back. So we make just another for loop. We do for let I equals 0, like everyone likes to do. I is less than the pivot point. I plus plus. Oh, Jesus. And then we do results array dot push array at I. So now we will start wherever the pivot point was, we got everything we needed, then we'll start at the beginning and go until we hit the pivot point and put that at the end, because push pushes things to the back of the array. So then I think we just need to return results array, right? So we return results array. So now if what do we have, this example array, if I do console.log rotate array and pass in example array and then also 1, what the heck are we going to get? 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I pass in a 2, it'll be 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. If I pass in a -1, it will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. And a -2 will be 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. That's crazy, right? This question is like hard, okay? So if you don't understand it right now, or you didn't get it before, that's fine, you know? Rotating things is difficult. Imagine being asked in an interview on the spot, you have 30 minutes to rotate a grid 90 degrees. Like, no one can do that, but you will one day, so don't worry about it. It's just like, this is like kind of like a practice thing, you know? I think rotating. If it doesn't click right away, it'll click one day eventually. But I think rotating is difficult, so it's just my 2 cents. Any questions before I start objects? Yo.
Sorry, more syntax with sugar.
That's good, bro.
They said in the solutions video there was if it's greater than or equal to 0, they gave a question mark right colon left.
Say no more. So, I think this isn't that hard to wrap your head around, so I feel comfortable telling you about this now. I'm not going to do this in this example though, because this is already annoying to think about. So, I will do it here. Let's say I want a variable called, I don't know, direction. Love it. And what he's referring to is a question mark or a colon. These things by themselves do nothing and cause massive errors because they mean nothing, okay? You can, it's probably, whatever. You can think of the question mark colon sort of like an if-else statement. They're called ternary expressions, okay? So basically, what we have here, if I'm saying const direction, the thing to the left of the question mark is the thing we are going to check its truthiness. So if I just say ABC, is a string ABC truthy? It is, right? If I did if string ABC, that if statement will always run, correct? So if I do ABC, then this ternary returns right. The colon is, whatever is to the right of the colon will be returned if the thing to the left of the question mark is falsy, okay? You could think of it like ABC, right. Otherwise left, okay? I literally do that in my head all the time, okay? So if I do, come on, bro. If I console.log this direction, what the might have to restart. One time my computer froze during a lecture, and everyone had to wait for like 15 minutes. What the fuck? Does this work? There is something wrong with REPL, okay? And I'm sorry.
kept doing that to me yesterday.
Yeah, it's I think it's like this time of day usually. The servers get like laggy or something. Usually comes back, but that is those are ternaries though. Like you have something that you're referencing, right? There's one thing. It's like either truthy or falsy. If that thing is truthy, then the thing that you want to do, like in my case, I was saying const direction, right? I'm just declaring a variable. And I'm saying const direction will be something. But what that thing is depends on that ABC, that thing to the left of the question mark. If that thing was false, it would be the thing all the way to the right. So this is very useful in some cases, and it's very clean and neat to write. Okay? You don't have to worry about it really, but it's not bad. I don't know what to do about this. So while this is waiting, I guess I was going to show you some stuff on objects, but I guess we can just start the slides. Yeah.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, sure.
For the ... array like spread
Yeah.
method, could you talk about how to use that? Like I feel like I understand what it does, and I can put it in like a push to another thing ... array, but other ways you can kind of like harness that information.
So-
Does that make sense?
So, do you know like shift? I mean, not shift, unshift?
Yeah.
Unshift, does everyone, oh, nice. Hold that thought. So like, if you do this, you get right? But if this is an empty string, empty strings are falsy. So you get left. That is basically what happens, okay? All right. Before I answer that, is there any more questions on this? Okay. So, if I did like const array of nums, and I set that equal to 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I can do array of nums dot unshift 1, right? And then I can console.log array of well, I guess this isn't really going to be doing the same thing, but you see how I'm putting something in the beginning, right? So I can, instead of doing that, but like this is mutating the array, so it's more like what if I was to do const new array of nums is going to be equal to 1, 5, 9, 100, comma, dot, 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 array of nums. The array of nums is like, it spreads out this array. This can also be used for objects, right? But what I'm saying is I'm saying that I am making a new array. You see this outer bracket? This is different from this, right? I'm making a new outer bracket. I'm defining an array with 1, 5, 9, 100, and then everything inside of here. However, did you guys remember how dot slice... Did you guys even learn this yet? The dot slice is a shallow copy. Did you guys learn about that yet? So dot slice is shallow. So is this, okay? I think we do pass... Robin's going to do pass by value, pass by reference with you guys and talk more about complex data types and how they actually point to references of themselves. But this spread operator is also shallow, okay? But this is something, this is like how you would use it, you know? Because unshift mutates stuff, and unshift takes a lot of processing, because you have to, I mean, like, splitting hairs between this, like, time of processing, but, like, you have to move everything once, you know? Whereas this is just, like, everything goes on the back, you know? Any more questions before I start talking about objects? Sick. So, objects. Objects are honestly sick. No. I like Apple. Objects are dope, okay? An object, const my object, is just an open and closed curly brace. That is an object. Like, you can make an empty array with open closed brackets, open closed curly brace is an object. And everything that goes inside of here will be part of this object, my object. Okay? Objects, like arrays, are ordered lists of elements, right? Objects are unordered lists of key value pairs. Every programming language has something like this, okay? Well, every object-oriented programming language has something like this. So what do I mean by key value pairs, right? So let's say I have a variable Bilbo, and I'm going to set him equal to an object. So when I say key value pair, arrays have indexes, right? Array at index 1 is something. Objects is object at key is something, okay? So if I have species as a key, and then a colon, I will put Hobbit. This is how you define a key value pair. In JavaScript, all of the keys are strings. All of the keys are strings. Don't forget that, okay? This will bite you later if you think there's something else, okay? They're all strings. However, you don't have to write the quotes. Isn't that sick? It just takes it and puts it into a string, okay? So const Bilbo will be an object with one key value pair inside, and the key is species, colon, value, a string, Hobbit. The value of a key value pair, like an index in an array, can hold anything, any data type. It can hold numbers, it can hold booleans, it can hold undefined, it can hold arrays full of objects, full of more arrays, okay? It can go on forever. They hold whatever, all right? So this is the basic definition of an object, okay? So before I get into more things you can do with an object, are there any questions on this? I just want to be real. Objects are new, okay? That's all they are. They're just going to be new for you for a bit and a bit hard to get used to, but I promise you objects are not hard. Just like you got used to arrays, you will get used to objects too, okay? Some people have problems with the syntax for a little bit, but it's not that bad, and objects are actually really easy to use, okay? So, how do you access things in an object? Well, with arrays, we would be like Bilbo at 0, right? And that would give us the first element. What if I was just like console.log Bilbo at species? Oh, isn't it that simple? It is. This is how you access something in an object using bracket notation. Now, there's one thing you have to realize though. I knew that this was called species. I knew also that all the keys in JavaScript are strings. So you have to put this in a string. If I did const example equals species, and then I put example in here, just like you do array at I, right? Bracket notation works the same here. So here, this is also Hobbit. Are there any questions on this? There is also another thing that you can do besides bracket notation. This is bracket notation, okay? Oh, notation. there is also dot notation. Can anyone think of using dots with anything? Like a dot push kind of thing? It's very similar. It's literally Bilbo dot species. No console. Bilbo dot species. You get Hobbit. It's the same thing. This is how you access key value. How you access values of an object using dot notation. Object dot key gives you the value. What if I did example? If I did Bilbo dot example, what will this be? Will it be Hobbit? No, it will not be Hobbit. Okay? This, what I just demonstrated for you all, this is the key difference between bracket and dot notation. Bracket notation evaluates the thing inside of the brackets first. Okay? Inside the bracket, JavaScript was like, all right, what the hell is example? I don't know. Let's find out what its value is. And that value happened to be species. With dot notation now, dot notation takes everything to the right of the dot, and it says that's a string. So what this is doing is it's looking inside of the Bilbo object and looking for a key that's literally called example. Okay? And just like if you try to access an array with 3 things in it, array at index 100, you get undefined. There is nothing inside of there with a key of example, so we get undefined in the console. If I put example in here, see, it is literally looking for a key example, so we get told you so, right? Who has any questions about bracket versus dot notation? Does that make sense to everybody? The dot takes everything to the right of it and makes it a string, okay? It doesn't evaluate that variable first. This is important, okay? This is important. So, now I'm going to talk briefly about assigning and adding. I'm going to do these both at the same time because they are the same thing, okay? Technically. So, if I'm going to reassign the example, right? I can do Bilbo at, I'll do dot example is now going to be equal to 55. He's not 55, he's 111. So I will do 111. So now, that's confusing. So now if I console.log Bilbo, I get species and example is now 111. I did Bilbo.example is now going to be equal to 111. Does that make sense? I say Bilbo.example, whatever was there, since I'm doing the assignment operator, is now going to be equal to 111. Any questions? Adding is very similar, okay? Adding, if I say here, if I say Bilbo bracket age, I can do bracket here too, or I can do dot age. I'll do bracket just to show you that you can do either. Bilbo at age equals 111, 11D. So now we have example and age in here. You can think of this as adding something, or you can also think of this as reassigning. Whatever is there, what was there before, undefined, now it is there. It's 111, 11D, okay? But since the key was never there, you are adding a new key value pair into Bilbo. And just like you can add, you can also delete using the delete keyword. Delete Bilbo at example. Shit. So now, Bilbo. So now we only have species Hobbit and age 11 day. Does this make sense? Does this make logical sense to everybody? That's the most important thing. It's okay if you can't remember everything right off the bat, because this is like a lot of new things. But the fact that this makes sense logically is the most important thing. Yeah.
When you created Bilbo age equals 111,
Yeah.
you always added to the end.
No. So objects are unordered. Usually, this is a loaded question, but it really is. There's a lot of weird rules as to what comes first in an object, but generally just consider them unordered, and it might not always be like first come first served. How it appears in the console. See, okay, the cool thing about objects is that you don't loop through them in order to find something, you know? Looking up a key is constant. If it's there, you get it. If it's not, you don't. That's it. It doesn't like, when I'm doing like console.log bilbo.age, it doesn't look through everything until it finds something. It just pulls out that key and it gives you that value. That's what it does. That's why objects are really useful and cool. You don't have to like loop through things 60 times, you know? But objects are iterable, so you can loop through them. But how do you loop through objects if they don't have indexes? For in loops. This is the next thing that I wanted to talk about. But no, they are not ordered, and they will not always be in the same order, okay? But I can console log this a billion times. Maybe not a billion times, maybe like 100 times, because I'd get bored. But it will probably always look like this. But you cannot count on that, okay? But there isn't like a dot length property to objects, you know? You can't figure out what's the last thing, what's the first thing, you know? It doesn't make sense. There's no order, you know? It's not a list, really. I said it was a list before. It's not a list, you know? It's more of a dictionary. That's what Python calls these things, dictionaries. Anyways, Ruby, it's a hash. Anyways, so let's say I have const fellowship. That's going to be an object, and we're going to have hobbits, and that's going to be an array of Frodo, Merry, Sam, and Pippin. We'll have dwarves. I'll just put dwarf. And it'll just be Gimli. Elf. Legolas. Wizard. Gandalf. Men. Yeah, I'll do that. Men will be another array, and it'll be Aragorn. And it'll be Boromir. 4, 6, 9. Okay, cool. So let's say I wanted to loop through the object and console log every member of the fellowship, right? Forgive me for my Lord of the Rings examples. I don't know what else to do. So you would say a for loop, right? Let I equals 0, I is less than this dot length I plus plus. Wait a second, there are no indexes and there is no length. So what do? We do something using a keyword in JavaScript, and that is the in keyword, okay? The in operator. It's not a keyword, it's an operator, right? So the in operator, like if I did, forget this for a second, if I did console.log hobbits in fellowship, I would get true. If I did console.log Balrog, Balrog in Fellowship, it would get false. The in operator returns a Boolean, true or false, if that key is inside of the object, okay? So in returns true or false if key is in there, okay? So we can do let's key in Fellowship. Oh. Let's key in Fellowship. This is how you set up a for in loop, okay? You say let variable in object. The for in loop will then run through every single key value pair in no particular order, okay? It's probably going to be how you put it in, but like in no defined order, right? The key is always going to be the variable that represents the key in that point of time. So if I said if array dot is array, remember that one? Array dot is array of, I need the value, right? So how do I get the values of Fellowship of key? If it is an array, then I can do a for loop and I could just console.log Fellowship at key at I. Else, I could just console.log Fellowship at key. Dot length. Whoops. So we get everyone. All of you must be thinking, why did you do that so quickly and why didn't you explain it to me? So I will explain it to you. So we say for let key in Fellowship. I'm telling you right now, this is a loop. So we are going to start somewhere, and it's wherever we start, this key will have a definition, and Fellowship is just always going to be that object, okay? The object won't change, but the key is going to change every time. So if the key changes every time, forget all this jazz. If we do console.log key, we get hobbits, dwarf, elf, wizard, men, right? So if we just do Fellowship at key, notice how I am using brackets, okay? We get an array, string, string, array. String, that means 3 strings in an array. What if I were to use dot notation in a for in loop? We get a bunch of undefineds. Why is that? Do you all remember me saying how dots notate? Yeah.
Because key is not a key in the object.
Yes. The dot takes everything to the right of it, makes it a string, and looks for that. It doesn't. I don't know if it really makes it a string. It looks for that key specifically in here. So there is no key in Fellowship, right? So we use bracket notation because, like the I in a for in loop, the key or whatever this is, I can call this species, right? It'll be the same thing. It's just declaring a variable name. That will always be something different in each iteration of the loop. Okay? So, we check. We check to see if Fellowship at species, object at key in that point of time is an array. If it is an array, we do a for loop. We loop through that array, and we say console.log Fellowship, the object, bracket species, so we get the array, right? We already know this is an array, right? At I, at this for loop point of time. So we get Frodo, Merry, Sam, Pippin in that order, okay? Any questions? Otherwise, if it's not an array, we just console log the string because we know it's a string.
So, I know that for hobbits, right, like you have them listed in brackets.
Yeah,
Could
because
it be listed there, like not in brackets?
No.
Like it's not technically an array?
no. This would be like if I just did this.
Yeah. Then that's just one.
This is just a syntax error.
Okay, so like one long string.
You can have like multiple.
Can you say let variable equals this, comma this, comma this? So you can't say that this key has a value of this. I said that really weird. This key has a value of this, comma this, comma this, right? A key, it can only have one value. Something can only have one value, right? In this case, before, it was one array, right? It can't be two arrays. It can't be 4 strings. It's got to be one string, right?
So like when you're saying dwarf Gimli, you're literally just saying like the value of dwarf is.
The key dwarf will have a value of a string Gimli. These are not variables, these are keys. Key value pairs. You have the key, dwarf, you have the key, and then that gives you the value. The key unlocks something and it gives you the value, if you want to think of it that way.
Oh, why is then in quotes or in the fellowship? So
The key. The key.
This,
Yeah.
do you remember when I yelled at you guys that all keys are strings in JavaScript? But you can omit them. It does not matter. Honestly, like, don't do that because it's a waste of time to press the apostrophe twice. Like, why would you do that? You know?
Style shows. Oh, that's
Yeah. No. Honestly, yeah.
okay.
But yeah. Any other questions?
Maybe this is too ahead. Like, what's like a relative real life use case of getting into objects?
All data is stored in objects and arrays.
I see it in arrays. I guess okay. I'm thinking of like like looking at data.
Do you
tables.
remember the zoo inventory question?
Yeah, that one. I see.
That is an array of like one thing and then another array, but you would have no knowledge of knowing what those things really represent. Sure, computers are ones and zeros, but the people that are writing programs are humans, right? So objects, a fellowship will have these things in them. So if I know fellowship at hobbits, I will know what to expect. You know? It humanizes things. It's more descriptive over one thing. Even the Bilbo example, right? Bilbo will be a species, will be hobbit. Well, not here, but age will be 111, right? If Bilbo was an array of just two things, like, I don't know what it would be, right? Why would index 1 always mean age? That's weird. Objects are used to be more descriptive, you know? And like I said, looking up a value is constant. Very fast.
This is a step back question.
Yeah.
Before, when you added an age as new key for Bilbo,
Yeah.
I was surprised that it would be with brackets and not curly brackets, like when you were initially setting up the object.
It will never be like that when you are assigning or accessing or reassigning values in an object, you know? Because an object itself is the curly brace. However, accessing values inside of it, you will always be using bracket notation. Same thing as strings, same things as arrays, right? At I, except here, inside of there, we have to put in the key. But you don't have to do that if you know what it is. You can do dot notation, right? Bilbo.age, that'll give you something. But the dot won't be useful to you inside for-in loops. Okay? Yeah.
You ever use const or let to define a key? Or you just write the thing?
You can't, right? Because have you ever tried to use const when you define I inside of a for loop? Because what do you do at the end? You do plus plus, right? You reassign it. That thing is going to change. Const, you cannot reassign anything. But so we do let. Let this new variable species, and it will be equal to every key during the iterations, right? So species will always have a different value, and it will always be every key inside of there. So if you're like messing with some data and you don't know what kind of object is coming back, the first thing you would do is just write a for in loop real quick and console log all the keys and all the values, and you'll know exactly what you got. Does this make sense? So if I wrote a function down here, const kill Boromir, and this will take nothing, and it'll just say for let key in fellowship, I can do if key triple equals men, a string men, because keys are always what? Yes. If key equals men, fellowship at key dot pop, right? So if I do kill Boromir, invoke it, here I'll console.log fellowship, and then here I'll console.log fellowship again. Oh, yeah. No. Sorry. Dot pop. You can see that there's no Boromir here. He's dead, okay? We got rid of him, okay? He's not in the fellowship anymore. Because we looked and checked if that was the men key, so we know that we have the value of that array of Aragorn and Boromir, and I know I put Boromir at the end, so I just do fellowship at key dot pop, because this is an array and I can alter it. I can do that. I can access everything inside of there. I can change everything inside of there. I can loop through it. I can do whatever. So I decided to kill Boromir. Okay? You can. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. Okay?
Just a minor question. Why wouldn't we need a curly bracket after if key equals to
Oh, this is my bad. So this is shorthand because I'm gonna be real with you guys. If the if statement has one line inside of it, you can do this. You can omit the curly brace. You do not have to do this. You can just delete this and delete that. Same thing with the else. Else console.log not Boromir. You know? It'll be the same thing. Only if it's one line that would go inside of the curly braces. If there's like, if this, push this, then reassign that, then something, I don't know. Yeah. Then you have to put the curly braces, because then it's a block of code. It's a code block. But this is shorthand. Be aware, I guess. But I will just leave it back like that. Okay. Yeah.
how do you know that in your kill Boromir situation you're going to kill him and not Aragorn?
Because I made fellowship, and this is not a programmatic function. This is just something that I made really quickly.
But what I'm just saying, what in the function like catches him rather than Aragorn within the men?
Because what does pop do?
Oh, because he's the last one in the.
Pops off the last thing of the last element in an array, right? So Boromir is the last thing in the array.
Yeah.
If we didn't know where he was,
Mhm.
we would have to loop through that array, check and see if it's Boromir,
Mhm.
and then don't add him into like a results array that we had or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
it would be more annoying to write, so I didn't do that. Does that make sense? If you guys still have questions on objects, don't worry. I will go through some slides and I will say everything I just said again. Okay? So can I start the slides, or do you have any other questions you want me to live code real quick? Is my voice loud enough?
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. All right. All right. All right. Okay. So in this we will say what is an object, why are objects useful, the type of object. I didn't get into that, but I bet you can guess what it is. Accessing, adding, changing, deleting values, the in operator, for in loop. I forgot to show you object.keys. Don't worry, it's pretty easy. And nested arrays and objects. Okay? So, what is an object? An object is an unordered collection of key value pairs. Like arrays, objects store values, but instead of storing them in numeric indices, objects store values in string keys. String keys. String keys, okay? Let my array is an array of two things, value and value 2. My object is an object where we have a string key 1 colon value 1. String key 2 colon value 2. If you console log my array at 0, at index 0, we have value 1. If we have my object at key 1, we get value 1. Okay? Key value pairs. You have the object and you have the key, so you can get the value using brackets, right? Bracket notation. Nothing new about bracket notation, right? Cool. So why are objects useful? Consider representing Pasheen the cat as an array. An array is a good place to hold an ordered list of values, but it doesn't store any information about what those values actually represent. So an object string keys allows objects to store more information about the values within it. My bad. That's my bad. So you could see Pasheen's name is Pasheen, its age is 7, and the color is gray and tabby. Whereas this, this doesn't really tell you anything about the actual information that is being held there. This is more descriptive. As you can imagine, when you are building applications and using real data and transferring data from one part of your application to another, it's a lot easier to write functions that can handle that data if you know what everything is, right? That makes sense. Okay. So the type of the object, this is a little complicated. It's object. Next, creating an object. Created a new object using curly braces, and an object's keys are always strings, but you can actually omit the quotations, right? I showed you this. You don't have to actually write string name, string age, string color. You can just write name, age, and color if you're choosing to make an object like this. So accessing a value, you use bracket notation to access values. Pass a string into the brackets that correspond with a string in the object. So if we do console.log Pasheen at name, console.log Pasheen of age, console.log Pasheen of color, console.log Pasheen of not a key in the object, we get Pasheen, 7, gray and tabby, and undefined. Because if, just like an array, if you try to access something at an index that doesn't exist, you get undefined. If you try to look for the value of a key that isn't in there, you also get undefined. Right? Any questions so far? Please. Like I said, this is all new stuff. And I really don't think it's all that complicated, but it is a lot to take in, you know? So it's okay if you can't remember everything right away, because I don't really expect you to, and nobody does, okay? But as long as it makes sense, okay? If it doesn't say something, I will explain it as best as I can. So when you access a value, any variable or expression that evaluates to a string can be passed into the brackets as well. So if I say key to check is name, pushing at key to check, I could even do this, pushing at call plus or, you get pushing and gray and tabby, right? Because the bracket, key to check is actually name. Name exists, so we get pushing. The same thing is in for loops when you do array at I, right? I is ever changing. It's always changing, right? The same thing is here. The bracket evaluates what that I would be, what this variable would be. If it's not a string, it's got to be a string, okay? If it's a number, I'm pretty sure that it'll just coerce that thing to a string and look for the string value inside of the object. So it'll be like a string of like 25 or something. Okay? Yeah.
So basically the rule is when you're calling it within the bracket, you always have to put it inside of quotation.
It either has to be quotations or it has to be a variable. If key to check wasn't defined here, JavaScript would say, "What are you doing? This was never this was never defined." You know, and you'll get a syntax error. Does that make sense? Right? Cool. You can also use dot notation, which is dope. Dot notation is quick. You don't have to write brackets and worry about closing them. You can just write dot this, dot that. However, it does not evaluate variables, okay? This is important to remember. If you write key to check is equal to a string name and you console log pushing dot key to check, it's looking for something called key to check in here. That does not exist in here, okay? That is a very important difference of dot notation. Do not use dot notation in for-in loops, okay? Just don't. Because the key is always changing, right? The key isn't actually, we're not looking for key. We're looking for what the key represents. We're looking for the value of that key, right? The value of that variable key. So if you just do in a for-in loop dot key every time, it's just going to be undefined every time, okay? Does that make sense, right? And that's the main thing about dot notation. Any questions on dot notation? It shouldn't be that weird to see the dots, right? You do dot push and dot toString, dot to uppercase, whatever, dot this, dot that all the time. Array dot is array. It's almost like dot push is like a key or something. It's like values an object or something. I mean a function or something like that. Maybe you'll learn about that tomorrow or something. I don't know. Anyway. So adding a key value pair, use bracket notation or dot notation to add a key value pair. Okay. Yeah. So as you can see, we have an object pushing, right? The same object we've been seeing the last like 10 slides. We have name, age, color, pushing 7, gray and tabby, right? So if we just do pushing bracket quote sister equals Stormy, and we do pushing dot brother equals Pip, you can see that these key value pairs are actually now in the object. And it's that easy to add things to one, okay? But if we did pushing dot name is Pip, now pushing's name would be Pip, okay? Because adding and reassigning is the same thing. It's the same syntax, okay? But you're doing different things. When I say it's the same thing, that means that keys are unique, right? If you try to add a key that's already there, you're not adding what you're doing. You're erasing what was there before and replacing it with what you wanted to add, okay? Keys are always unique, okay? Anybody have any questions on that? That makes sense, right? I kept saying how reassigning and adding is the same syntax. You just, whatever was there, it is now this. So if you try to add something that was there and you didn't know it, well, the thing that was there is gone, okay? You shouldn't be running into this problem too much, although it does seem scary, okay? But keys are unique, and that's actually very helpful, okay? Any questions? Okay. So changing a value, you can use bracket or dot to do this, and it's the same thing. So we have the age of 7 here inside of this object Pasheen. And then we say Pasheen at age is now going to be 8. We are changing that to 8. Now we do Pasheen dot age plus plus. You can do that as well, because now it's 9. Right? Plus 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 equals 1. Objects are good ways to like count frequencies. You know? Like if you have like, I don't know, like a book, and you want to see how many words were used, like what was the most used word or something, every time you would see something that is in the object already, you would just add 1 to its frequency, right? Its value, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
But does that mean that 7 is a numerical then? That's what I'm confused, 'cause it's like.
Do you think, you mean 7? The 7?
Yeah, because it's, well, okay, so you're replacing, right, 8 with 8, and then you're adding 1, which then you'll cancel out 9?
Yeah.
So does that mean that if that's numerical,
Does that mean what?
that it's numerical? That it's not a string? Because you can add.
Values are everything. Values are anything. The only thing that needs to be a string is the key. The keys are always strings. This is the number 7, literally the number 7.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
Just like arrays, the values can be any type of data.
Right.
Anything, even other objects. I didn't show you nested objects that much. Yeah.
With the bracket age, can you add to it?
Yeah, you can do plus plus there too. Same thing.
Inside the bracket?
Inside
Maybe inside or outside?
the string age plus plus.
Oh, no.
Right? Got to do it outside because pushing at age, the string age, evaluates to a number. So that's the thing you want to plus plus to. Any other question? Yeah.
So basically, you can add like, you call the object, and then that particular key equals, and then you can put whatever you want after that. Like you can put like
You can
lots
put
of
in.
lines of code of like things to manipulate the value. Like you could, right? You don't just have to. Like similar to what you did with
No,
plus plus.
no. You can't put like a lot of different lines. Like after an assignment operator, there has to be one value, right? You can write a ternary if you wanted to, but you can't write like a function block. It could be one function, but it can't be like a block of things, you know?
Right.
It has to equal one thing, you know? But you can reassign it to anything. It was a number, you can reassign it to false. You know? It can be anything. But it's like, treat that the same way you would treat assigning like a constant or a let, you know? A variable. Anything. The same rules apply. Next. Deleting. I showed you this briefly. I mean, you could just use the delete keyword to delete a key value pair. You just do delete pusheen at age, delete pusheen at color. They're not there anymore. It's very straightforward. Delete object at key. The key value pair is gone. Bada bing, bada boom. Any questions on the delete keyword? Cool. So the in operator I touched on briefly, it basically just returns true or false to see if the key is in the object, okay? Console.log, name in Pusheen, and then sadness in Pusheen. True, false. Name in Pusheen, true. Sadness in Pusheen? False. It's like a question, right? Makes sense, right? The in returns true or false. The left is the thing you are looking for. The right would be the object you're looking in. Does that make sense? Cool. So the for in loop, I touched upon this for a bit. So use the for in loop to loop through all the keys in an object. As you can see, it looks a lot like a for loop. However, those semicolon things, there's three rules you have to define inside of the for loop are no more. Because this is a for in loop, you just declare a variable where you will store the actual key string during every iteration in the object you will be looking through, okay? This is important. The actual object has to go there, okay? So, as you can see, during every iteration, we will just console.log Pusheen's key is Pusheen at key. Pusheen's name is Pusheen, Pusheen's age is 7, Pusheen's color is gray and tabby. You get the key by literally saying key. That will be the key, and it will always be a string. To get the value, you just do Pusheen at key. This is very powerful. You will always have the key and always have the value in a for in loop. Always. Okay?
I don't understand this line.
So,
More specifically, I don't understand how Pusheen at key, like what that's calling exactly.
it's not calling anything. Pusheen is an object, right?
Right.
Right? Pusheen is an object? Pusheen bracket key. That's how you access variables, right? Bracket notation.
Right. So in this situation, like,
You're iterating. That's what the for in loop is doing. Key is a variable. What key is equal to each time changes. The for in loop loops through the entire object. So key will once be name, once be age, once be color. Right? Because it loops through the object and he gets everything. So if the key is different every time, right? So when the key is name, right? When the key is name, if we do Pusheen bracket variable key, which actually equals name, we will get Pusheen. Right?
right. But in this situation, you're not doing like key plus plus. So why is it console logging all three?
Because it's in a for loop.
It's gonna go
A for
through
in loop.
each key in the-
So it goes through one key value pair, it's done. The code runs, it's just one console log. It iterates to the next key, age. Then, key is age, Pusheen at age is 7. Then it iterates again, goes to the next key. Does that make sense? It's not indexes, it's not 0 to the end, but it goes through every single key. That's really what it's doing, right? That's really all it's doing. It's just saying, going through this object and putting this key into this variable. And you can use this variable inside your code block. So, since we can use that variable, that key, we can access the value. Because the value changes. Because the key changes, so you can access the value. Using bracket notation.
And in this situation, let's say it was not a string that was in name, in color, let's say it was an array.
You would get an array up there, not gray and tabby. It would be console.log, Pusheen's color is array, and then this, you know?
Even if it was multiple arrays within
Yeah.
color.
If you just have like an array of like 6 things, and you console.log that, what you would see in the terminal is just like an array. You know? What you see is what you get here. And this Pusheen is this object. Bracket something should be a key, you get a value. The key, this variable key, is defined here in the for in loop, and it captures at each iteration the key each time. Is there a question? Yeah.
Where you say for let key,
Does key have to be the word key, or you can
Key is a variable. You can call it whatever you want.
Okay.
Before, when I was looping through the fellowship, I briefly changed it to species.
Oh,
It can be anything. Usually, I put key usually for everything because that makes sense to me. However, in some situations, if you want to do like multiple for and loops and deeper objects, it would make sense to name those things differently, right? Like,
Yeah.
depending on what it is you're looping through. Like, species made sense for fellowship because everything was a species: hobbit, dwarf, elf, wizard, whatever. Yeah.
I just wanted to go over. So when you're doing, you're never gonna get like Fusion's name is 7 because when you're accessing name, it's gonna put it into the key, so into that like value.
Yep.
Okay.
Because it doesn't, like, the value doesn't matter, right? At one point in time, the key is always going to be one thing. During one iteration, like in a for loop, when I is 0, you're going to run through your whole code in that for loop, and from top to bottom, before I is incremented, I is always going to be 0, right? So if you do array at I, it is always going to be the first element. Always at the 0th index. The same thing is true here. Key, for the first iteration, will be name. In your code, if you ever do pushing at key until from top to bottom during that point in time, you will always get this string pushing. Because pushing at name is pushing, and that will always be true. Yeah.
So let's say we only wanted like the key's name and age to spit out. Is there kind of like in for loops when writing for an array, you would say like if I is less than, like
If
the length. So
Like
is
a
there
way
like
to just.
if key is not equal to a string color, then console log these things. But if it is, do nothing. You know? That is how you can check. If you wanted everything that was not like an array, you would do if array.isArray pushing at key. Like bang, you know? If you have the key and you have the value, you can do anything. Does that make sense? A little more sense. Okay. Yeah.
And so if one of the value is an array, and if we wanted to list out, like,
We-
instead of the alpha being an array in a sentence, if we just wanted to be a string, what would be an easy way to do that?
You would, well, if you knew that it was an array, you would just put a for loop in and then loop through those things.
No, like what we do.
Pushing at key at I. You know? If you didn't know it was an array, you would have to do array.isArray of pushing at key to check first. Yes.
So there's no concept of dot length here, right?
No.
Like, you cannot find out the length unless you like go in and like count the number of times key is output and stuff.
There is a way to find out how many things there are. I will show you. In like maybe 1 or 2 slides. So you use the for and loop to loop through all the keys in an object. Does everyone understand why this is happening?
Yeah.
Nice. Maybe? If not everyone does, I will explain briefly. Pushing dot key. Can somebody tell me the value of the key in Pusheen? That's a trick question because you can't. Because it doesn't exist. And that's what dot notation does. It takes everything to the right. It takes everything to the right. And it looks for that inside of this. It looks for the key of key. This is a very common mistake, right? Because look what happens. I'm just getting undefined for all the values. Because it doesn't evaluate what the variable key represents at that point of time. It just looks for key every single time. So don't use dot notation in for and loops. It's that simple. Okay. This is the thing I forgot to show you. And this is how you can check to see how many key value pairs are in something. Object.keys. So use object.keys to get an array of all the keys in the object. And then you could do dot length off of that. they don't have a slide for this, but just like object.keys, there's also object.values, which gives you an array of what? Do you think? The values, right? So just to go over again, object.keys is a lot like array.isArray, right? It's capital object, the global object, dot keys. And you pass in another object, right? Just like array.isArray, you pass in the array you want to check, or the variable you want to check to see if it's an array. Object.keys needs to take an object, and it just spits out an array of all the keys. This could be useful. This could be unnecessary. You decide how to use this. If you're doing a for in loop, and inside your for in loop you're doing object.keys, stop. Look at yourself. This is probably wrong. Okay? I'm just letting you know. Think about it. Why would you have to get an array of all of the keys in a for in loop if you're looping through the whole thing and you'll just get them all anyway, right? So that might not be the best place for this, but object.keys is very useful in some cases, okay? And you will come across these when you're doing your work. Maybe, maybe not. There's multiple ways to do everything. There are no one right answer, but there are a lot of wrong answers. So nested arrays, like we did before. Oh yeah, so this is what I showed you guys this with like the hobbits and the men, right? Like there were a lot of hobbits and two guys. So here, instead of just a string of gray space tabby, we have an array of two strings, gray and tabby. And we could do the same thing here. Pusheen.colors at 0, Pusheen.colors at I. Because Pusheen.colors is what? It's an array, right? So if you take that array and you look at the 0th index and the 1st index, you get gray and tabby. This is kind of putting everything you learned Thursday from multidimensional arrays together with objects now, right? You access the value with the object using dot notation. Since it's an array, you just look into it. Does that make sense? Any confusion? All right. This would be the same thing. So as you can see, inside Pusheen now, there's a siblings property with another object with two key value pairs. Sister for the key, Stormy as the value. Brother for the key, Pip as the value. So we could just do Pusheen.siblings.sister, Pusheen.siblings.brother. You get Stormy Pip. This is really simple, right? Dot this, dot this, dot this. You find it. If you know what that key is. Right?
What would that look like in bracket?
Pusheen bracket string siblings, bracket string sister. But this, if you know what it is, if you know what the key is, I recommend using dot. It's just faster to type and it's easier. But not in a for in loop. Because I showed you what happens. Yeah.
You keep saying if you know what the key is, but
Yeah.
you don't know what the key is. It's sort of a big question.
If you don't know what like the key values are, you're probably looping, right?
Mm-hmm. So you get all of them.
Yeah. Like when I say you know what the key is, you'll probably be making the object yourself. You know? Yeah.
So I guess if you don't know what the key is, then you also don't know necessarily if the value that comes after it, if it's an object or an array or any of that. So I guess, and then if that itself has another like deeper level to it. So I guess somehow you have to like account for all of that in your code, right? You just have to keep checking.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. So don't worry about like handling the edge case of like what if this goes on 1,000 times, or sometimes it goes on 50 times, or sometimes it goes on 1,000,000 times, because I personally, not Robin, I will be here to share with you the wonders of recursion and how that solves that, okay? Don't worry about recursion, though. It's a headache. Okay, but this is just, object dot key gives you the innermost value, right? Any questions? We ran a little bit over, okay? And I apologize. Any questions before you take like a 5-minute break and I slack out pairs? No? All right. Go take 5 minutes. I'll slack out pairs at like 8:25.